Welcome. Thank you for coming out. I'm kind of actually really happy that we had this opportunity to have an in-face meeting. It feels like it's been a long time since we've had an opportunity to do that kind of interaction, and it really opens up the way in which we can have a community dialogue. So thank you for coming out. As you can see, we are starting part of that interactive thing as you walked in the door. And Homes for Hartford is really the name we came up with to really begin to express what it is that we're after. And why are we after that? We have a housing challenge in our community, basically a housing crisis. And we had planned on updating our town plan housing chapter before the pandemic had hit. But pandemic hit, and now it's even more urgent that we do that. So this is the second of two community meetings in where we're exploring together what does it mean to provide homes for Hartford. And we chose the word homes because housing is more than just a structure. It represents a lot of different things to people. As you can see with this word wall or word cloud, it's used both terms, we're trying to get a sense of what does a home mean to people, and what do Homes for Hartford mean for people in our community, and how can we begin to plan for that in a way for today, tomorrow, and way into the future as well. So at our first community meeting that we had back in February, that was the culmination of several months of work with the Planning Commission. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I realize that. My name is Lori Hirschfield. I'm the Planning and Development Director here for the town of Hartford. And working with me this evening are a few other people, if they can introduce themselves.
So I'm Kevin Geiger. I'm the Director of Planning for your Regional Planning Commission, which is the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission.
And I'm Kyle Cass. I'm a planner at the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, Kyle Cass. I'm a planner at the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission.
And I'm Matt Osborne, planner for the town of Hartford.
So this evening, we are bringing together a lot of different people, as well as different efforts that have been going on within the town for the last year as we're working on the update of our housing chapter. The Planning Commission is the entity in the town that is their responsibility to update our town plan. And in the context of that, they over time, and again did it this time, established a working group called our ad hoc steering committee. And there are members of that are here as well. And I'll let you introduce yourselves as you may want to. Put your hand up and introduce yourself. Planning Commission members and ad hoc committee members. John. Go ahead. Good.
Toby. Bruce.
Anyone else?
Jesse.
I'm John. Dylan.
Anyone else that's part of the steering committee? Here we go.
Colin Butler.
Andrew Winter.
Okay, thank you all for attending, and thanks for the work that you've been doing up to date. So tonight, the first meeting was focused on us really looking at what are some of the key issues and opportunities and challenges. And the focus of that meeting was looking at the issue of affordable housing, available housing, and the type of housing. There's a lot of intersect between those three elements, and we discovered that, but there's also some things that came out of that. And what came out of that started building towards tonight's meeting, which is looking at what are the goals that we want to have for our housing plan. What are the things? And when we talk about goals, we're talking about those things that are the big picture. When you're walking down the street in 20 years, what do you want to see? That's the goal. And below that, we're also looking at what are some strategies. Those things, those policies, those big statements, a little bit lower than a goal, but how are we going to achieve that goal? That's our strategy, the policies we may be putting in place to achieve that goal. And then below that, you typically have actions. And that's what's the to-do we need to do to make that strategy happen, to make that goal happen. So tonight's focus is going to be on the goal and the strategies. And we're going to actually, at this point, I'm going to hand over the baton a little bit more to Kevin, who can speak to you a little bit more about digging into some of those issues that are going to be reflected in what we discussed this evening.
Thanks. So maybe I should come stand up here. So there's a piece of paper in front of you. You don't have to read it now. I think it was slightly available before the meeting. But this is really synthesizing a bunch of stuff that I have learned over the last several years working on housing. And am I okay?
I'm not hearing you.
Oh, we're waiting for this thing to do whatever it does.
By the way, CATV is recording our general meeting for a...
Did I turn it off by accident?
Oh yeah, I am hearing it.
Okay, good. Take two, right? I'm Kevin Geiger. I'm the Director of Planning at your Regional Planning Commission. And so I wanted to frame this because I find that if we do or don't frame a discussion well, we don't see something that's inside or outside of that frame. And the first thing is, when we talk about housing, we talk about housing units, like we're short housing units. So you hear that a lot. And I want to emphasize that, number one, they're homes to the people who live there. So we often try to use the word homes, because if I say housing unit or home, you have a different mental picture immediately as to what I'm talking about. This one's kind of generic policy-wise, and this one, like, people actually live in, right? Nobody says, I'm going home to my housing unit, right? That's the first thing. The other thing is they're not all units. They come in different shapes and sizes, different numbers of bedrooms, different prices. But when we talk about housing need, we just tend to have a number out there. And really, what we want to talk about a little bit are those subsets of things. And the other thing is, if we have a great big number of units, we don't want you to think that we have to physically build all of those boxes. One of the things that we're certain about, especially in places like Hartford, is that a bunch of the envelopes of buildings are already there. So there's a lot of structures out there that could be repurposed, and especially there's a lot of people living in houses that are way too big for them, mainly seniors. Some of our data in our previous meeting that Kyle brought up shows, if the data's right, that hundreds of new households are one person, 65 years or older, living alone in Hartford, just in the last handful of years. We're potentially adding about 50 of those per year right now. So that's a lot of housing out there that we have. And then how do we help the seniors stay in that housing or move to the next housing? And so that's the other part, is if we want people to move here, we have an affordability problem for the people who are already here, who we want to stay here, but we want people to move here as well. We want people to move from their big old house that doesn't fit, maybe to a smaller house in a better place, but we also want families to come in, especially younger families, because they have school children and working age parents, both of which we need. And then this other concept that really came out of that last meeting is that it's not just, houses, it is neighborhoods. And so how do we talk about not just the housing, but kind of that mosaic of stuff that makes up a neighborhood? Maybe the sidewalks, it may be a park, it may be different kinds of housing. But that's what we're going to talk about a little tonight too when we break out. One group is a little more around the units, and one group might be a little more around the neighborhood aspect. So I just wanted to give those concepts to you so that we can kind of think about this thing in a slightly wider thing. And when we use affordable housing, or as I say, housing that is affordable, that covers the gamut. That's everywhere from I have no money and no house to I'm a surgeon trying to locate a Dartmouth and I can't find a house that's appropriate for me. And trust me, there are surgeons who are turning away jobs and engineers turning away jobs because I've talked to those companies because they can't find an appropriate house. And we don't want that to happen. All up and down the spectrum, and that's a particular peeve of mine, is everybody. We have all these essential workers now, and we call them essential workers because they're essential, That's the tricky part of that name, as I say. And we want those people. We want the plow drivers. We want the cashiers. All of those people are essential for our communities to function. So we better make sure that they can come live in our town.
So we're going to get right down to work pretty quickly here, but I want to just give you a picture of what the rest of the evening is going to look like for you. So we've gone through the first part, welcome, and our introductions. And we're going to start our breakout sessions. And those are going to run for about 40, 45 minutes. And we have 2 breakout sessions. Where are... okay, so we're going to, in this one, could you read the...
So in this one, we have 2 main goals.
Right.
So in this one, we have goal 1, which is diverse, quality, affordable housing is available for all. So that's thinking about not only just the units, but it's affordable for all, it's diverse. This is goal 2, which is build housing that meets the needs of the community and facilitates neighborhoods. So this is a little bit more of the system, not just the units.
So I found my paper, thank you. That's perfect, because within that we've given some strategies that we have been discussing within our steering committee group with the Planning Commission. So we're propping some stuff up there, but that's not the limitation. So we really want you to dig into it and think a little bit more about that and have a real good discussion and dialogue. We're going to come back here around 7:40 or so, and we're going to do a report out from each of the groups so that we're sharing that with everyone. And then starting a little bit after that, then we'll go into the closing for the evening, and then we hope to wrap up by 8 o'clock. We might run a little bit over than that, but hopefully that'll work okay for the most folks. But we'll try and stick to that as closely as we can. Okay, with that being said, please pick a place. There is an overlap in terms of the conversation, so if you feel like you might not get your point of view discussed or whatever it is, or the thing is, pick the one that you think is the best, but the chances are it'll come up probably in either one of them. And we are trying to divide it out pretty evenly so that we can have a good discussion in each group and not have it be too large. So go ahead and go for it. And Kevin, you're going to be in 1 or 2?
Which do you want, Kyle?
Okay.
One.
All right, and Matt and I are going to be in 2.
Run through the 2 titles.
Yes, so again, goal 1 is diverse, quality, affordable housing is available for all. And goal 2 is build housing that meets the needs of the community and facilitates neighborhoods.
So if you want to just for a minute or 2 browse at the discussions of what is going to be in each of them, they're up on the wall pretty large. You could go ahead and just look at that real quickly.
1 or 2.
But and then pick a side. And where did my... Thank you all for doing what you've been doing. It's great. Do you want to report out? How are you doing that? Do you guys want to go first?
Sure.
Go for it.
Well, first off, thanks everybody for participating. It was really nice to hear everybody in the room sharing. I would say a couple of themes that came out. One is certainly we stole a little bit of your thunder, and then houses are in places. And so transit and little stores and walkability and other things make the house there. And so if you're going to put a house somewhere or put a bunch of houses somewhere, you better be taking all that into account. But that if you put that stuff there, that can also help houses go there. We talked about maybe some different ways of financing a house. So ways in which you can do shared equity on a housing, or trying to get other forms of capital in, especially to help individual homeowners do stuff. We didn't talk about zoning much at all, which was nice. We talked about ADUs a little bit. Rent subsidies, a big thing that's certainly an elephant in the room on all this stuff, is that the actual price of building a new unit is a very tough thing.
Yeah.
And so some type of subsidy or something is going to need to come into play to drive down that price.
Yes.
And so we didn't get into the actions about necessarily what we're going to do, but if we're going to have that diverse, quality, affordable housing for all, we're going to need to address price. somehow. Other things, we had some things we put on the parking lot, which were not strategies. We talked about energy, some. Other things.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing with energy is just looking at, where does the housing go in town, and bringing up vehicle miles traveled in the sense that, if we're putting housing way out there,
This is okay.
if we're putting housing way out there, that's going to require someone to own a car. They're going to need to drive to the store or to drive their kids to daycare or what have you. And all of these have added costs, whereas, trying to concentrate it in areas where these services already exist, and, maybe where there's sewer and water, that played a big role in the conversation. And then housing conversion as well. Looking at a lot of these big houses that we have, and saying, well, you maybe have one person living in this giant house, and how can we try and make housing so that people can move freely between a large house to a smaller house, maybe make space for new families that have children. What are ways that we can do that as well?
Okay. Very good. Lori, I think you want to talk about next steps?
Well, I want to do a little bit over debriefing on us.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So we had quite a bit of similar and overlap on you. We had a lot of bit about some conversations about conflicting land uses and creating incentives to increase housing. Sometimes you have areas where there is housing already there, and then there are other uses, and how can we create more opportunities in places for housing? So we looked at also the repurposing of building or land where there already is the opportunity for increasing housing rather than building new. That has to be a really important formula for us because the cost of building new is so astronomical, particularly when you don't have infrastructure in place, that it's going to be very challenging. So we have to really broaden out the way, as you were speaking at the beginning, Kevin, about how we can build housing without necessarily building a structure. So we also had quite a bit of conversation about the concept of planned developments or cottage houses, because that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. When we're thinking about neighborhoods, it was also a lot of conversation about what's important in our neighborhoods. Walkability, a lot of that same kind of stuff we had. Easy access to transportation. Creating a new sense of neighborhood. If you're doing new development, consolidating your development into smaller scale housing and smaller scale lots, and preserving the natural or recreational areas, and even areas that could be for food development surrounding it. Looking at all of the different areas within town and saying, where should the new development be? We know that compact village centers are important, but in some of those villages, like in West Hartford, they've lost some of the amenities within those communities that make them a community, make them a neighborhood, and finding ways to bring that back. The incentives and the cost of housing, and bridging the gap between the cost of housing that the private sector most often is bearing the cost of that, and then with other resources, partnerships with public entities, but finding other resources to bridge that big, huge gap more and more. Because that's why affordable and a lot more housing isn't being built. It is because of the affordability. So we have a lot of the same things. We are running a little bit late here. I don't want to... Let's see, infill development, again, is a big factor that needs to be looked at. Okay, we talked about that. And then I just want to share with you. So one thing I did at the end of ours was ask everyone to go around and share one word out of what we talked about here in that so that we can capture everybody's sense of it. So I'm just going to share that with everybody. Redevelopment, shared resources, sustainability, parking, community, respect, urbanization, incentives, developers, balance, and affordability. So I think in many ways we're touching on both the things, and I feel like we got a good. Anybody want to chime in that I may have dropped off something?
I think one other thing we touched on was the idea of having a central knowledge base where there's information to readily hand out to homeowners who want to have new home share or want to subdivide into apartments, or even information package ready for developers to make, like, here's how it's easy to develop in Hartford. So figuring out, pulling that information and making it readily available to the right entities.
Great. So thank you. So at this point, our next stage of what we're going to do, we're going to take this information back and we're going to start putting into into a set of, do we need more goals than what we have? Obviously, we have more strategies that we want to consolidate together, and we're going to start building out our plan in some sections, and then really go into the next phase of looking at putting together a more detailed description of our goals, our strategies, and our actions. There will be some work being done at the Planning Commission level, and then we're looking at our third community meeting being sometime in middle of June, right? And in the meantime, I just want to share with you a couple things. Please come out to our accessory dwelling unit. It's not only just about accessory dwelling units, it's really talking about things like home sharing, tenant-landlord relationships, and that kind of stuff. Anybody who's interested in developing housing, this is going to be a good resource for you anyway. And then spread the word about what we're doing here. Look on our
Lori,
website.
what day is that? Just for
I'm sorry.
For the camera.
Everybody, we handed it out. So that is May 6th, 10 to 3 p.m. It's going to be at the Hartford Area Career and Technology Center. It is a combined effort between Vital Communities, Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, thank you very much, Town of Hartford, and the Hartford Area Career and Technology Center as our sponsor there. So it's going to be a great day to really start digging into this informational thing. And we've been planning it for several months, and we see it just expanding from here. And it's also an opportunity that we're kicking it off. So there are extra ones of here over if anybody wants to know more about that. You can go on our website. We'll have more information on that as well. Homes for Hartford. We now have a Homes for Hartford page on the town website. You can get to that by going to the Planning and Development Department, and then you go to on the top of the left-hand blue column, it says Homes for Hartford. Just click on that, and we have a lot more information that's being plugged in there. We're going to be reconfiguring it in the next week or two because we're getting so much information. We're going to start having some drop downs so you can get to it. But that's the place where you're going to find information. And as always, you can always call us. Our phone number is 802-295-3075. You can always call Matt, email Matt at mosborne@hartford-vt.org, and he will make sure that he gets back to you. Obviously, you can always come to our next meeting that we have with the steering committee that's open to the public, and just keep it in mind. You got ideas and you thought of something after this meeting, you want to make sure we got it, call us. And then we are also, what you're seeing here is the beginning of our traveling multimedia community outreach effort that we are sponsoring at JAM. That's the Junction area, Junction Arts and Media Center, a new one in downtown White River Junction. It's going to be kicking off probably next week. The questions that we had at this meeting and the information that we've been discussing is going to be on this multimedia format, which would give people the opportunity to do things by video, by audio, and even drawing. And then we'll also have a word wall. So thank you, JAM, for being part of our partners in that. It's been really great. And that will be traveling around the town at various points, coming here to the Bugby Senior Center, going to the village libraries. We're going to try and get it around town over the course of the next few months. So get the word out that there's something really happening about housing, and it's really important for people to be there, be a part of the conversation. There's nothing that we shouldn't be talking about. You know, if you're thinking about it or if your neighbor's thinking about it, have them come out and be a part of this. And anybody have any questions, or should we just wrap it up for the evening? Do you guys want to add anything more?
No.
Well, thank you all for coming. We so much appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next event.
Not much. Just